only recently found out just how Scottish I was. My dad has been in England for all these years, never visited Scotland, but his grandpa was Scottish, born in Scotland. He inherited the mansion in Jamaica and the land, etc. And when he was a child in the 30s and 40s, he would have to visit his grandpa on a Sunday. And his grandpa made him and my Uncle Carl read 3 books to them out aloud, because that was the thing you did in the 40s. You'd read out aloud to your grandparents to show how your education was proceeding. And he read Burns, the Bible, and Shakespeare. So he was very familiar with the Scottish ancestry and all of that. He even supported Scotland against England. I didn't even know, because he never told me. So he even supported Scotland against England. I didn't even know, because he never told me. So, really weird that I'd lived here for 15 years before finding out that. So I've only just recently found out my deep connection to this country. So it was obviously calling me in some way.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize it.
Yeah. It just came back full circle. That's exactly
Well, I'm one of those people. I'm a Rasta, right? So most Rastas probably rename themselves. That's normally a thing we do, because we believe in Africa, we believe in Africanism, and we believe that these names are slavery names. So they're not our real names. But the only way we can trace our real ancestry is through the ones that have got names. So I only know about the Campbells, and I had not changed my name, and I don't know why I hadn't done it. I hadn't got round to it, but I'm really glad I didn't, because it's the evidence, it's the proof that there's this connection to the country, and that I'm as Scottish as any of those white Australians or Americans or white South Africans who think they're so Scottish when they come and visit here to play golf, right? But I'm Scottish too by the same logic. I'm part of that history too.
Things you've done for the Black community in Scotland, out of all of them and all the things that you've done, and be it through the arts, be it through politics, be it through anything else, what would you think would be what would you say was your most significant contribution to Scottish society today?
I would have to say it's definitely the awareness around the slavery and colonial legacy. Getting Glasgow and Scotland to acknowledge that. I spent a lot of time in the last 4 or 5 years, in fact, since 2013, really. I'm really actively working on this. I started by doing a play about it, about the slavery legacy for the Commonwealth Games. Worked with Anne McLaughlin, with people at Glasgow Life like Jean Cameron at the time. The historian Stephen Mullen, he wrote a book called It Was the Us, The Truth About Glasgow and Slavery, which kind of addresses that, the built architecture and where it came from, where the money came from to pay for that. Tobacco, sugar, and cotton were entirely grown by enslaved Africans in the Caribbean and the Americas. So Glasgow merchants got rich off that. So did Edinburgh merchants. So the 2 big cities we have in our country became wealthy, and the country became a wealthy country and industrialized with wealth from that experience. So that was a first for Glasgow. Chairing a subgroup called a short life working group called the Slavery Legacy Working Group, and we are currently consulting. We've had 2 meetings so far. I passed a motion around Black Lives Matter last year to get that instituted, and we are now consulting with museums, historians, members of the African Caribbean communities, and also we're linking up with cities like Bristol, Liverpool, and our colleagues in the States as well, to give us advice about how to best do this consultation. How do you address the history? How do you make positive use of it to achieve anti-racist aims and goals? So I think, overall, that's my contribution. If I die tomorrow, I'd be happy that has happened, and that the city is on this journey towards recognizing that. There'll be an apology at some point down the line, but I think apologies would be meaningless without the concomitant, anti-racism actions that we require to change the curriculum, decolonize it, teach people about anti-racism in schools early, change the structures, make reparative acts. So things like naming the school building James McCune Smith Learning Centre. So that's happened. I'm very proud of it. I'm proud that Scotland's fessing up and acknowledging it, and that when we have this conversation about independence or not, we're at least questioning who is a global Scot, who's connected to this country,
Exactly.
Think what the Black community in Scotland's influence could be, now that we're more aware of ourselves as Black and Scottish and
Yeah.
belonging.
Yeah.
We can have a profound influence on the way that the culture and the country sees itself. Whether it becomes independent or not, it's more about how it sees itself in that world. If it has a more apologetic and accepting and acknowledging relationship with what it's done with that world, that gives you more of a chance to interact freely and more equally with other countries and other people's cultures, and be accepted as well there, because people should respect Scots, especially if they really realize that Scots are undergoing a sort of multicultural awakening, that they're realizing that their influences come from a whole number of places, that there are a whole number of communities that exist here, and that they're all part of the mosaic. And it's trite to say it, but yeah, everybody makes Scotland, everybody makes a contribution. Just having a sense that the culture realizes that, recognizes that past, and is willing to atone for it. Part of that is giving some of the stuff back that we've looted that are in our museums. Some of it is paying reparative justice in some way, shape, or form. That's partly down to us not having enough political power in the system, and that's why I really encourage people to stand for office, stand for councils. But we spent a lot of time last year trying to encourage BAME people to stand and put themselves forward.
Which is, you actually answered a little bit with how do your experiences in Scotland and in England inform your work and what you do today, essentially.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that there's people like you around, that there's now this generation of confident, very determined, young, Black and Scottish people. You are a distinct and unique variety of Black people. Legacy of colonialism and slavery and all the interactions we have with, and we obviously realize how Black Lives Matter was an important moment for us here in Scotland, because it was where your generation told the rest of us that racism that's homegrown right here in this society, as it has developed, you've only known this society. You haven't known what Britain was like before that, or Scotland was like before that. It was never a part of me. So I always felt Caribbean. And as I grew up and grew it into Rasta, and then heard reggae, and I was just slightly too young to be part of the Brixton riots and that 1981, but it was something we were very aware of at school. Riots happened all over the country. Black youth in particular rebelled against police harassment and tyranny in their communities. I was a CND, I joined the Labour Party, I got involved in a revolutionary group, I was very involved in the miners' strike in 1984-85. I went to the Kent mines, I went to the Yorkshire mines, and gave my solidarity. I raised funds, I collected tins, took the tins down to Kent to help the miners there. I was involved in the printers dispute, which was in 1986 at Wapping, against the Murdoch Empire. So I went through all those experiences, and mostly defeats, actually. That's the weird thing. I went through all these defeats. The resilience from that was that despite all those things, the Black community consolidated itself, developed an identity, developed a community, and won its permanent space within the life of England. So I came to Scotland with that experience, very, very definite Black community, radical politics, radical culture, resistance. And I came with that experience when I arrived in Glasgow, just at the point when a Black community was forming, where in a meaningful sense in terms of numbers. There's always been a Black community in Glasgow, but it wasn't in the same way and with the same variety of nations and backgrounds and indeed numbers. I mean, and I learned from that okay, right, the things I've got to do to make sort of anti-racist politics happen from below within this community, to get it properly integrated, I've got to use those experiences. One of them was around, one of the main disadvantages that I would have had in the 70s and 80s was that the general racist education system, which basically undervalued our abilities because we were racistly discriminated against. So our results were worse. We were more likely to be expelled from school, all of that. That's not true now in Scotland. Actually, African and Asian kids actually do better than white kids in school. They outperform them right through school. I know this because I'm on the education committee in Glasgow, so I know the facts on this. And we have done consistently for 10 years. So we no longer have that level of disadvantage. Where the disadvantage comes in is when you guys leave school or leave university and try and get a job.
Yeah.
And that's where the discrimination is. And until we sort that out, you will still need to march.
Yeah.
And you will still need to go on things like Black Lives Matter demonstrations. Who owns a car and is black has been. It's. I suppose the Scottish particularity about this is that we have a denialism historically that we have a problem with racism. In the past, they would have said, "Oh, there's not many black people here, so that we don't have a problem because there's small numbers."
Yeah.
Then it's now we've got quite a lot. Oh, we haven't got quite the same problem as they have in England. Sure, we don't have armed police killing as many people as. Thank goodness we don't.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one thing, that the degree of police repression is much less in Scotland. So it's the proof that there's this connection to the country, and that I'm as Scottish as any of those white Australians or Americans or white South Africans who think they're so Scottish when they come and visit here to play golf, right? But I'm Scottish too by the same logic. I'm part of that history too. It's like British enough. British was white, English was white, so I could never identify with being English.